A young woman revealed that she and her friend had almost given up hope before they were attacked by a group of vile men intent on mixing their drinks, charging the girls against their will at a time when all hope seemed lost for these women. One night, a warrior in shiny, seemingly broken armor appears suddenly on the scene. He was ready to deliver them from their doom and mete out brutal retribution to anyone who would harm these girls. As witnesses to the presence of this majestic warrior, we are compelled to jump back in time and find him lying helpless in an indescribable field near the narrative that clues us in. He is not of this world, nor do we know how he came to be here or why he took part in this memorable battle. An unnamed soldier soon loses his composure in this confusing situation, but fortunately, he manages to regain his certainty. He returned to the moment he began to realize that his appearance was now strange but familiar. He remembered that before being transported to this place, he had last played online video games until he passed out in front of the computer, and now his body was changed. He lived inside a bear that closely resembled the character Ark from the game for the sake of seeing if he had really been teleported into the game world. With a terrifying steel blade by his side, he tried out a special skill called a wyvern attack. He didn't really expect anything to happen, but then an unknown warrior unleashed a massive energy shot that destroyed the surrounding forest area. This made him certain that he was no longer in Kansas. All his legendary equipment matched the ones he knew, except there was a strange difference. When playing this game last time, he was using a character class that didn't have access to the weapons or skills he currently had. It seemed like he was not transported directly into the game, but rather into a world that was very similar to him. Despite that, he was confident that the powers he had would be more than enough to handle whatever came his way. With his path at a standstill, he decided not to continue being confused and searched for a nearby town in order to understand his surroundings. He then used the wizard spell gate in the game to teleport to the previous civilization. Although there was no specified destination, he wasn't worried as he realized that he didn't actually exist in the game. However, he was worried when the spell failed and only sent him off the edge of a cliff instead of magically to a nearby town. By catching his last move at the last second, the knight managed to save himself from an unexpected death. The near-death experience left him convinced that the gate spell was useless, so he decided to use dimensional movement that allowed him to fly high into the sky and to the nearest location. This ability allows users to move to places visible to them and is often used by less experienced players to escape from enemies early in the game. An unnamed person had launched a flying blast through the cloudscape with such ease, but when he noticed that the sun was about to rise that day, he was not surprised. He decided to find a place to rest and refuel before continuing his journey, as it was the best thing to do. He descended to the ground once again, and at that moment he realized that he was only wearing underwear. With such a huge mass of metal, the knight did not feel heavy or hot. This led him to remove his helmet to see what was revealed of the skull that was completely encased in skeleton. The man was speechless due to his lack of lungs, which had somehow failed to do so. The skeleton knight began to recall more details about this game, especially about the fact that players could customize their avatars with various visual options before starting a new profile. However, one visual option was locked behind a paywall, that of an all-over skeleton skin. Knight began to worry that people might mistake him for a monster and try to kill him. He also realized that he risked running into high-level monsters who were attracted to players with skeleton skins. Therefore, Knight decided to keep his profile as low as possible so as not to attract unwanted attention. However, he also realized that he needed to spend money to earn a decent living, so he decided to find a way to do so after finding a nearby town, creating money income right away. Once again, the Skull Knight soared into the sky and explored the surrounding forest in search of signs of civilization, only to encounter a carriage with many people scattered around it. It all looked harmless until he saw someone feeding. Another person had his stomach filled with steel, and eventually his life ended with a sharp sword blow. This made the Skull Knight realize that he had had a very unfortunate encounter, and his eyes scanned the area he noted. Many other corpses and a pair of defenseless young ladies were attacked by a group of vile bandits. The latter was clearly responsible for this bloodbath, as he overheard one of the criminals suggesting to his comrades that they were having fun with the quote-unquote skulls of helpless women. Knight knew very well that he had to take a stand against this human scum. This realization made him realize that he wouldn't inform them of his presence before he dealt with them, so he decided to strike suddenly. Better the chance to win a fight as impeccably as the strange sacks of dung that suddenly attacked one of the girls. The skinless warrior leapt onto the scene and ran through the attackers with his sword, giving them their just reward by defeating their leader. Using all his strength, he ended the lives of those who helped him commit this heinous act. After accusing the knight's skull of being a monster, the remaining bandits immediately headed for the hills, although he didn't mind letting them go with their lives, attacking the wyverns with equal skill, eliminating them before they could escape, and ensuring that no one could claim final vengeance for the girls they had attacked and the men they had killed. For a moment, the hero posed the unnamed warrior, performing an impressive act before checking on the welfare of the women he had previously helped. They look fine considering the circumstances, but the Skull Knight seems less concerned with them and more interested in whatever lies he is up to. He would have told them about his identity if they had asked, but soon decided to pretend to be a nice middle-aged soldier who happened to be traveling before suggesting that the girls clean up nearby. While cleaning up the rest of the freshly discarded trash roughly, he received thanks from one of the brown-haired young ladies, and they agreed to follow his advice. However, the girl who was the target of the attack was too shaken to communicate with her savior as they headed towards the skull. Knight observed the aftermath of the bloody engagement by counting a total of 15 casualties, 9 of which were the bandits themselves, and the rest were the guards who were guarding them. Before his arrival, he wiped out their worldly possessions, as it would be of no use to them anymore. He robbed the bandits of money and weapons before casting a fire spell that burned their bodies to a crisp. As the girls return to the scene, a fitting end to the scourge comes from the rogue. The fair-haired girl has finally gathered enough to express their gratitude to the Skull Knight for saving them from a tragic end. She expressed her relief that they made it out of that terrible encounter. Despite being unscathed, he informed that it would be best if the two of them changed out of their torn clothes from the battle as soon as possible. Having done so, the unnamed soldier offered to escort the young ladies to a nearby town. So that no other disasters befell them during their journey, they gladly welcomed his presence. They had every intention of repaying her kindness, so the servant girl introduced herself kindly. She was Rita Fallon, and a daughter of the noble Roland Lalea du Rubirute family of the Rubirute family. Gazing intently at her savior, who clearly wanted to learn the name of the gallant knight who freed her from that terrible place. The warrior, previously known as the Skull Knight, took a moment before finally deciding to adopt the name of the character he assumed. He introduced himself as Ark, a self-effacing adventurer who would only sing after becoming a hero. This is when this fate began Ark's new life in a new world, unbeknownst to him. And this is the first step of the Knight Ark in his nondescript life. Then we will go to the interior of the forest, where we see a small boar creature trying to escape from a giant lizard. The lizard wraps its tail around the little boar's body before devouring it and eating its corpse with an unpleasant chewing sound. After that, we will visit Ark, who stays at an inn in town after delivering Rita and Roland to the royal palace. The next morning, he wakes up excited for a very important day. Before deciding to explore the foreign city he was in, this was the royal city of Lubielti. He realized that this city lacked the fantasy feel he expected, more similar to a real city than from a fantasy video game. Ark stepped carefully through the mundane and aggressive medieval city, where the location made things even more challenging for him. With his oversized and flashy armor, he tried to avoid attracting attention, but remained determined to survive in this city with everything he had. Life was important here, but while traversing the busy city streets, he felt it was time to look for a quick source of income, which he had mentioned earlier. He decided to visit the local mercenary fellowship in hopes of obtaining a certificate of enlistment that would allow him to take on missions and earn generous monetary rewards. He talked to the old man at the guild counter about how to get a certificate, but the man immediately noted that Ark's impressive equipment made it hard to believe that he really lacked the money to become a mercenary. The man also explained that to be officially recognized as a mercenary, he had to go into the forest and defeat monsters, and bandits. Again, proving his victory over Ark, as well as having no problem in proving himself before getting approval. Still agreeing to the terms, and turned to leave the hall. However, some of the mercenaries inside began to gossip about the strangeness of this situation. A tough newcomer must have a plan to make him succeed in a place like this. The counter clerk believed and thought that he might have a sick child that required him to take a low-paying and dirty army job, which caused one of his friends to choke on his tears. Somehow the background got complicated. People were moved by his moving story. He also received a lot of heartfelt support from people he may not have known before. His backstory hardly supports his desire to live an under-the-radar life. Later we see Ark eating the roasted rabbit meat that he had bought before leaving for the expedition. Despite the fact that he didn't have the throat or stomach to digest the food, the knight managed to kill 2 enemies so far. Although this certification test went quite well, he felt a little disappointed that the forest around the city had no vivid fantasy. As soon as the words came out of his mouth, despite being attacked by a giant holding an orc-like supernatural creature he expected to encounter, the formidable-looking enemy managed to raise his weapon before trying to ram into Ark's skull with a devastating attack. However, the skeleton knight easily dodged the attack. Before cleaving the monster in half with his legendary sword, the fight ended just seconds after it began. Moments later, Ark finished his certificate exam and returned to town with 3 large bags of his enemy's body parts in tow, much to his surprise. No one noticed as he walked through the city streets with his attention-grabbing spoils of victory, more than the humble knight would have wanted. However, it was a price worth paying because now he would get his mercenary certificate and start making good money from the quests they offered. The guild members were impressed with his ability to kill beasts in no time. When he stepped out and remembered the mana stone system from the game Ark, he recounted that their artifacts were dropped by monsters after they were defeated, which could be used to create magical spells, make weapons, and serve many other useful purposes. Skeleton Knight. He did so as a memory to keep in mind for the future, when the guild officer finally gave him the certificate he was so desperately looking forward to. As soon as he requested to be sent on his first mission, the officer drew Ark's attention to the quest board, where genuine mercenaries like this wore armor. There is no restriction on reading the available missions carefully and choosing whichever mission one wants once given the choice. However, it should be noted that the more important missions had been taken by the full mercenary group, leaving only small-scale missions. For him, being a lone rookie, he was hardly bothered by this arrangement. Despite realizing that he had little chance of getting unwanted attention if he did menial tasks compared to more extravagant and important quests, he still chose to do his first quest. It didn't matter to her if her first quest was rougher, such as escorting someone from a nearby village as they picked herbs. At first, the officers had a hard time believing that such an impressive warrior would choose such a simple quest. But after Ark kindly explained that he enjoyed picking herbs, he was sent on his way without further questions. The next day, Ark used dimensional movement to arrive at the village he was aiming for, at the location of the person who posted the quest list. When he arrived at the designated house, he prepared to greet his client, but all he encountered was a little girl and her smaller sibling, both clearly frightened by the presence of the very imposing knight who had suddenly visited them. Fortunately, their minds were instantly put at ease when Ark introduced himself as a mercenary, accepting his escort mission. Maruka was the name of his client. The little girl felt happy to finally get the courage to show up. Even so, she still doubted whether a knight like him should help her when she barely had any money to pay for his services. Giving her time to serve him, the kind man assured her that it would not be a problem, even though he was just a potion enthusiast and was happy to have good equipment and good intentions. He was eager to help her. And Maruka thanked Ark before starting the mission. She also said goodbye to her younger sister, but also told her to tell their mother that they would return home any time. She was confident that she would be safe on her herb-picking expedition, thanks to her ironclad bodyguards. As Ark and Maruka left the village courtyard, they felt compelled to ask why the little girl had chosen not to tell her mother personally about this trip before going all out. She said that she probably wouldn't let Maruka to go. She was allowed to go as long as she did, so there was no other choice for her but to sneak out while her mother was away. Maruka then went on to explain that her father had died a year earlier, making her mother efforts in raising two small children futile. With her mother always carrying the burden on her shoulders, their father often went on herb-picking expeditions to sell medicine for the family's survival. They want to ease their mother's burden by doing what their father did to help the family. They are precious little angels. If she can make her mother happy, then whatever hardships she faces will be worth it. She won't feel inadequate anymore. Maruka touched Ark's heart with her story, reassuring the little girl that they would feel silly in their efforts to bring happiness to her downtrodden parents. Soon, they arrive at their first stop, where Maruka tells Ark that they will be looking for an herb called kokura, which can cure certain skin diseases and wounds. A number of different flowers were seen to be useful as insect repellents when they were burned by fire magic. The skeleton knight was so impressed with the extensive knowledge of plants and their many benefits that she advised the boy to become a teacher in this field. If one day the subject felt like having a slightly shy demeanor, she could do so. Exercising while thinking about the advice of the expert, the little ones never imagined the possibility of a career like this before they entered the forest to retrieve what they were looking for. The ironclad warrior was very surprised that they had not encountered any monsters. Even so, they must not let their guard down considering how far they had strayed from civilization when they arrived at a slope that Ark deemed too dangerous for a little girl to walk down. Suddenly, they saw a large creature approaching, and the child was too excited to reach the next batch of potions to warn her bodyguards. Ark tried to warn her not to rush forward so dangerously, but at that precise moment, he realized that their luck in avoiding an encounter with a monster was over. They arrived from the front without further warning, the same colossal lizard that we saw feasting on the wild boar from the bushes, suddenly setting its flesh-hungry sights on the defensive Maruka that had unknowingly walked into its trap. The time had come for Ark to take up his sword and ensure protection for the young girl if they still had a chance to live. Meanwhile, Maruka's mother had returned home and was told by her younger sister Helena that she had gone herb-picking with the help of a bodyguard. Although clearly unemotional upon hearing this news, the mother suddenly calmed down as she clasped her hands together and prayed that her daughter was well taken care of and made it home safely. It seems that Maruka's new friend, the lizard, has something different about him. Although he began with the desire to chase and prey on his small prey, his huge claws eventually failed to find their mark as Ark rescued the girl at the last second. The knight had just enough time to correctly identify the cursed object, having recently gotten close to the vile beast, and discovered that it was a giant basilisk. Luckily, the creature isn't quite as terrifying as it looks, so it won't send mid-level players running away. Although he flinched, there was nothing that someone as strong as him could not overcome. Perhaps realizing this, the basilisk tried to ignore Ark's presence and returned to attacking the defenseless child, only for its attacks to be parried very easily by its enormous bodyguard. It seemed that the monster was following Ark's urging of the wind to get between itself and its prey. But when it started nodding its head in a very conspicuous manner, the skeleton knight recalled the moment of initiating the deadly area of effect, called the stone gaze, and thought lightning fast on his own. Standing before the dead knight, the skeleton performed his own trick. Pulling out his tightest heavenly shield, he took a firm defensive stance. Protective magic began to swirl around him, its power level much higher than the basilisk's ineffectual stone gaze. This made Ark upset and convinced that it was time to end this charade. With a skill of judgment, a wave of titanic magical energy overwhelmed the lizard and finally made it kneel down and die. A very sad death for someone who was busy killing a little girl rather than fighting fairly. Ark returned to check on Maruka's well-being shortly after, where the tired child adjusted her position to be comfortable enough to start singing praises at how amazing he was. The squire easily cut down the beast, but she injured her leg while trying to escape the giant lizard. Finally, Ark was asked to cast a healing spell to heal her leg. After that, the conversation shifted to the fact that there was another beast terrorizing the village, called the Fang Boar. The skeleton knight then peeked at the supposedly horrific threat, only to find a cute and grumpy round creature that wasn't too terrible. The couple made it back to the village after overcoming the non-frightening creature. Before the sun went down, Maruka's mother rushed to embrace her baby daughter and thank the heavens for keeping her alive and well. Only now did Ark realize that this woman would naturally worry for the girl's safety if she became ill. In an attempt to preempt her anger, he apologized to her mother for taking her on such an unexpectedly dangerous expedition. However, Maruka was quick to explain that Ark had done nothing wrong and assured her mother that she actually had no ill intentions and was instead very angry. She was very grateful to the man for looking after her daughter so responsibly because she had a strong structure. The knight took this time to warn the mother not to punish the sweet little girl too harshly because all she did was a result of her endless love for the only remaining parent and her desire to see her mother smile. These words seemed to echo strongly in the woman because she did refrain from scolding Maruka and only hugged her tightly as an acknowledgement of how much the little girl cared for her. Even though she understood Maruka's position, in the end, Ark still decided. Someone was opposed to telling Mom that the giant basilisk had almost taken her daughter to lunch. Instead, when asked if there were any problems while they were away, she simply suggested that everything should go smoothly. He believed that the royal conquest troops would take care of any beasts that might lurk in the forest within a few days. However, the same could not be said for poor little Big Fang, who was later killed by Ark before their return to the village. The men gathered around the corpse of the monster that had terrorized them, giving credit to the knight for finally freeing them from its mischief. The time came soon after for Ark to take leave of this ancient village and return to the royal city after successfully completing his task. Before kicking the stone, Maruka met with her first mission. She thanked him one last time for all his help and asked if he would stop by to visit her. The skeleton knight was confident that they would meet again, though he made it a point to tell the girl that their fight with the Godzilla clone should remain their little secret. After that, he immediately set off for the city and felt very comfortable seeing the royal subjugation army heading towards the flat on the way back. He declared that from now on, the Maruka and its citizens would be treated well and constantly, so he could continue his mercenary duties without any worries. Several days had passed since then, and we once again traveled deep into the forest. There, we saw the night squadron dealing with another creature that seemed to be similar to a giant basilisk. Ark easily dispatched the creature, but the so-called warriors were being overrun by the beast. It's a testament to how highly skilled the skeleton knights are and how lucky they are. Eventually, their unity succeeded in making the creature submit, and they cheered happily as they successfully completed another mission after a deadly fight. A light-haired man gave the older gruff man a report on the casualties in the battle, with 3 dead and 11 wounded. The end of their battle registered a significant improvement over the previous one with the giant basilisk. This provided some good news as they returned to the city. However, their return would not be as quick as expected. A panicked soldier suddenly appeared to report the discovery of a second giant basilisk corpse. The body had only a few battle wounds, suggesting that it had fallen by a lone soldier. This would require a real army to handle it. The captain could hardly believe that a soldier could handle such a monster alone, and questioned whether the monster was capable of doing so. In fact, they had already faced other beasts with similar bodies, just to make sure that the theory was irrefutable. They saw the obvious sword slash and the fact that the muzzle had already been taken off the beast's body, both confirming that humans were responsible. However, the captain kept offering the idea that perhaps the elves, who universally have greater combat abilities than humans and also have access to magic, could be the culprits. However, the idea was rejected when the soldiers pointed out that the Canadian forest, where the elves lived, was too far away from the location. They couldn't have come so far just to kill these huge lizards. Finally, this was enough to convince the captain that humans with the strength of a small army actually faced these basilisks alone and managed to come out victorious. He even considered them more akin to gods or demons than the ordinary humans he had encountered. When we met Ark, he was repairing an army of bandit thugs who had robbed wealth from an unexpected land. He naturally cleans up the shop in time. At some point, the narrative tells us that he has actually moved to another city and has graduated from low-level missions to missions of higher difficulty. The mission to confront these bandits was one of medium-level endeavor. As he was reading the spoils left behind by the bandits, his ears accidentally caught the sound of a small forest creature running around the pile of goods. His eyes met with that creature. He wasn't entirely sure if it was a fox or a squirrel or some magical combination of both, but he was certain that the poor creature had been injured by the bandits during its capture. Ark cast a quick healing spell on the frightened and wild squirrel-fox hybrid. The spell not only saved it from further bodily damage, but also brightened its spirit. The cute little guy seems to instantly fall in love with the armor-clad guardian who roams around in an exhilarating chase. This hinted to the skeleton knight that he wanted to come with him. Ark made no attempt to resist his charms and happily put him on his shoulder earlier. After cycling through some less than satisfactory options like oag and tempura, he finally decided on a name for his new friend. He chose the name Ponta from the Japanese word tanpopo, which means dandelion. Ponta was very happy with his new name. When he jumped vigorously into the sky in an exaggerated celebration, Ark and Ponta cheered each other on. We then switch perspectives to the city of Diento, where the skeleton knight now resides in the royal palace. Marquis Triton Daudiento receives a visit from the Duman council members to discuss their failed mission, which turned out to be controlled by the bandits who first met Ark. The counselor tried to confirm that they were defeated by a mercenary. He didn't know who was blocking their plans. Smile. These nobles have a task to free all the giant basilisks in the forest near the city without them knowing. How funny. The same person who killed their bandit group also managed to defeat one of their big lizards, the Marquis Triton. Although not happy to hear that their plans always failed, he was comforted by the fact that they would succeed in carrying them out. Hence, by trading some highly sought-after elves, they now had a group of soldiers heading towards elven territory to kidnap some of those long-eared specimens. He ordered the wise counselors to carry out the mission immediately, before he was questioned about his son's whereabouts. She had run to Duman to inform him that Uterus had joined the warriors who were planning to kidnap the elves, much to Maris's dismay. There was no doubt in his mind that his foolish son would only be an annoying hindrance in this complicated operation that might take place. One more miserable failure in the remaking of the skeleton and Ponta Ark. The knight has found a new group of bandits to play with. This time the Nar avoided the confrontation and accused him of being a terrifying monster as they had seen. As they tried to escape, Ark accidentally tripped over their trap. However, thanks to a well-placed mechanism, he hardly lost his rhythm. With ease, he chased down a group of thugs before hitting each of them who piled up. With their bodies not fully functioning, the skeleton knight completed one more quest. He thoroughly enjoyed his lifestyle of defeating criminals and stealing booty, and his companion, the new creature, also seemed to be pleased with his achievements. They shared a beautiful moment by patting each other on the back before deciding to return home for the night through her extraordinary movement ability. Not long after they took to the skies, Ark saw a man make the potentially fatal mistake of walking on air. Alone in the forest in the middle of the night, he and Pon decided to go check if the person was okay. As they got closer, they realized that the person was actually an elf who was unaware of his frightening appearance. Ark, who planned to appear right behind the elf man, randomly informed him that this was his first time meeting one of his kind. The instant the ironclad enemy appeared, the elf felt his survival instinct triggered. He quickly pulled out a steel knife and placed it between them. He demanded to know Ark's identity and the reason for his being there. The skeleton knight then apologized for his sudden appearance and explained that he was just a chance traveler in the area. The elf didn't think too much about Ark's reasoning and focused more on why the Volpitsu form wanted to join humans like him. It was the official name of an animal race belonging to spirit critters that showed no interest in making friends with other living beings. Skeleton Knight explained that Ponta has been kind and comfortable with him since he saved the feathered ball from a group of bandits, proving that the biology of these small creatures is not as rigid as the fairy believed, setting that issue aside. Ark was curious as to why the elf man was wandering around the forest at night like this, but the long-eared man completely ignored his questions and instead began punishing the humans for their mistreatment of his kind in hopes of selling them as slaves. As Ark's prophet captured an understanding fascination, he felt frustrated by the elves. Even so, he was still confused as to why travel so close to human territory, when he knew full well that he risked being kidnapped and sold as a slave. The light bulb suddenly exploded on the frame's body. Once that thought arose, the elf brain immediately decided that it had to carry out the mission to rescue the people of its kind who had been captured. Ark interrogated the man as much as he could, and the tense silence that followed only confirmed his suspicion about the truth regarding the money. He assured the fairy that he had no intention of obstructing his path and would remain confident in his great liberation plan. And while the fairy was in no hurry to believe the words of men, he eventually accepted it. After Ponta began to squeak approval of the knight's skeletal beliefs, the unnamed fairy held Ark to his promise and warned him against getting further involved with the elven kind. Then, he drew up his hood and took a step away from the area while the knight was left to his own devices. Confused by everything that had just happened, he decided not to bother the elf any further and continued his journey back to the city of Diento. However, even as he made it back to his room at the local inn, he couldn't seem to get his mind off of it. The idea of meeting the long-eared Ark Liberator made him regret not knowing the man's name. Although offended by the elf's distrust of him, his main focus was the mistreatment that elves were subjected to by humans. Although he wanted to live a peaceful and simple life, he knew that he could not turn a blind eye if someone needed help. As such, he planned to leave with the Ponta the next day, without needing to guess their destination. The next day, the couple made it into the forest of the elves as predicted by Ark. This is the area that must be crossed by anyone who wants to hunt the elf species. He hoped they would meet in a magical way. One such villain, but he soon realized that saving the elves would not be that easy as he needed to consider their choices about the next course of action. Ponta found a large blood stain on the wet ground, the wounds they had sustained recently, and when suddenly hearing an angry voice coming from the nearby area, it seemed like they knew instantly who the culprit was and who the victim was in no time. Ark decided to follow the voice while hiding himself. He picked up a few branches before slipping into the bushes. From there, he peeked around and tried to figure out where all the noise was coming from. Although the situation was similar to the previous incident, where he encountered bandits, Ark quickly realized that this was actually a kidnapping going on. The victims were the elves he wanted to save. However, what made the bandit even angrier was the fact that the ones caught were small children, even though they hadn't done anything. This was very upsetting to Ark and made him even more determined to save the elves. In order to make them calm down and obey their orders, they were brutally and mercilessly beaten to stop them. The reason it was so horrible for a man was his seeming joy at stabbing a small child in the leg while laughing maniacally at the pain and anguish he inflicted on the long-eared girl. This man turned out to be the son of the equally terrifying Triton Marquis we met earlier. He is called by the name Uterin. A kidnapper advised him not to hurt the girls further because they wouldn't fetch a good price if they were too damaged. However, he vented his worries and ordered them to stop talking and start obeying his every wish. This apparently did not interest the kidnappers, but they obeyed his orders and started escorting the carriage. Not long after seeing the pitiful sight, Ark realized that it was his duty to end the worthless lives of the elven smugglers. He returned to the Diento. Unfortunately, he also realized that the way the men parted ways meant that he had won. It was impossible to get rid of all of them in one attack. This meant that one of them might have a chance to injure one of the elven girls before he could get rid of all the threats. He thought back to the elf man he had met earlier. He advised him not to get involved with his own kind, but the honor-bound knight had no desire to abandon such cruelty when he suffered, because of how he could take action to ensure that all elf girls benefited. Safely out, a woman suddenly glided through the bushes, unsheathing the sword at her side and aiming it directly at the people who were planning to cause more damage to the elves. They were instructed to stop where they stood and let the girls go free. No matter how well-intentioned this woman was, she had just signed the death warrant for every elf she hoped to save. Ark and Ponta were shocked by this unexpected turn of events, but unfortunately the smugglers were not surprised at all. While they praised her for her bravery, they also emphasized that there were nearly 24 elven prisoners that this elven woman alone could not possibly save. This made her a threat, even though she was a hero. Loneliness, the head honcho of the smugglers, approached the woman, and after realizing that she was quite beautiful and curvaceous, claimed that he would forgive her previous rude behavior in exchange for some very enjoyable fun time. He reached out to her hoping to indulge in the pleasure of her large buttocks, only to have the elf woman quickly and brutally release herself from the same hands that tried to grope her. After taking a moment to realize that she was now near him, the foolish scoundrel began squealing like a little pig while she held him in place. He was busy crying while grasping the fragile with his one remaining hand. With a systematic method, the elven savior began to cut and slice the rest of her retinue of scoundrels with such skill that even Ark was impressed by her masterful swordsmanship. It was enough to make the heir issue frantic orders to the remaining smugglers to surround the woman and pursue her. Quite easily they managed the first part of the order, only for the warrior woman to completely annihilate them before they got a chance to release any birds. They had offensive thoughts and tried to take her down one by one where she stood. However, one by one she sent them to join the rest of their comrades, whose lives she had ended by her decision. One man had the facility to give her a warning. He was an elven warrior and should not be taken lightly. Even so, that didn't stop him from committing brutal acts with lightning speed. The elven girls in the cage were overjoyed to see one of their own. He came to their rescue, while the man was completely confused as to how he could escape this situation with his life. There came a clear answer to the confusion when his thoughts turned to the caged elves whom he had once again stabbed. He brandished his sword before ordering the elf woman to surrender, making it clear that he wouldn't hesitate to end the girl's life prematurely. The arrogant heroine elf mocked her captor, unaware of the honor. She ignored his insults and ordered him to stop and surrender again, before bursting into laughter, thinking she had ended the bloodshed. But as the swordsman lowered his weapon and began to ponder how to continue without any of his elven brethren losing their lives, she realized the luck that had spared her. Although at this moment, a knight with a certain frame made his presence known, he offered much-needed help to the elven lady by appearing right behind and hitting the cute bastard with a ferocious armored lariat. The attack was so powerful that it eventually ended in devastation. As the team's rocket rocketed high into the sky, Ark gave the elf woman a playful thumbs up. The sign was a signal to complete the mission and end the lives of the merchants with his sword. Even the skeleton knight and the little Ponta helped clean up the shop after the smugglers were defeated. Ark took charge of himself to start freeing the captive fairy girls just for the sword warrior to then direct his sword towards him as if he didn't play a crucial role in ensuring the safety of his people. From the start, he boldly expressed his gratitude for the help while holding his sword just inches away from his head. She wore armor and stated that she couldn't trust someone who didn't show their face, even though they had provided a lot of help. The skeleton knight stuck to his decision to hide his identity, citing personal reasons, yet the unnamed elven woman tried to argue. Just then, she was surprised to see the Vulpasaka's breeches appear, and how cute the furry little guy was, eased her worries enough that they released the girl's cage, even though Ark continued to refuse to show his face to the elf. The woman expressed a light surprise and great frustration, as the humans had placed a special necklace on the prisoners that sealed their elven magic and prevented them from using spells to escape. This caused her confusion about how to free these children, but Ark saw it as just an obstacle on the path to their release. He began to weave anti-curse spells, which were then used to remove the cursed necklaces of the elven children. After that, he also took the time to heal the wounds inflicted on the elf. Although her evil army still doubted her trustworthiness, the elven woman admitted to possessing an impressive arsenal of magic weapons and obvious close-quarters combat prowess. The little girls experienced no fatigue in creating adorable hordes. The skeleton knight, who was considered humble, thanked Ark and praised them for coming to his rescue. He firmly stated that they only needed to call on him to defeat any smugglers who dared to harm them. The elven woman said goodbye. As the children return to their homes, the Sword Lady tries to make atonement after hearing stories about the cruelty and lack of empathy of humans and how they often put themselves in danger. Ark thought that he could save his people by using his good nature as proof that the morality of humanity was not completely destroyed, even though many elves tried to convince themselves otherwise. He was convinced that he would eventually come to their rescue. Around the super-large skeleton, an elf female warrior introduced herself as Aryan Gulas Maple, a warrior from the elf tribe of Ark. After introducing herself, she looted the bodies of the smugglers and helped clear the land by burning their remains to a crisp. The unfortunate incident ended with a sizable white-feathered bird flying into the scene and perching on Aryan's arm. This spirit animal was also the same as the Panta, and came with a message that an elf named Danka had confirmed its location. At the place where the elves were being held, they warned Aryan to meet them immediately so that they could begin their liberation operation. The swordsman assured the bird that he would soon head to the destination before sending it on its proper way. Although the bird was somewhat confused by what had just happened, the warrior informed her that elves often used spirit birds to communicate because the animals rarely liked humans. Nonetheless, Aryan quickly put the matter aside and came over to Ark with excitement. In no time they were together as his good nature helped him in helping the elven children from before. She believed her combat and magical abilities would be indispensable in the fight to free her kin. Hence, he insisted on lending his services to them, regardless of how the other elves felt about this arrangement. Aryan reached out to Ark firmly, hoping that he would accept her offer, and soon her hope was justified as the anomaly clad in armor took over the company. He took that hand and promised to do everything he could to ensure that their mission was a success for her. It was rarely known by either of these soldiers. It was at that moment that by holding each other's hands and agreeing to find their way side by side, they would take over, and this meeting would begin a very long journey. The first step in their long journey began when they decided to successfully cast the gate spell this time and teleport them to the Raydel River. That is, the river outside the city of Diento. Because of a worried Aryan, Ark questioned the choice of location, clarifying that it would be a problem if he appeared right in front of the ferry. He thought it best to move them far away, although his concerns were unfounded, as the elven woman was only impressed that he was capable of teleportation, especially considering how useful this spell would be to save her people. She firmly stated that she would rely on her partner in the upcoming battle before they began the final journey to the city of Diento. Upon arriving in the city of Diento, Aryan informed the skeleton knight that he was scheduled to meet the character at a gate near one of the bridges at the entrance of the city. Shortly after reaching that point, they were again approached by the man they had been waiting for. Danka was shocked to discover that the elven man she met in the forest a few days ago was Ark. She was skeptical why Ark, who was notoriously slow, would participate in their mission. However, Aryan, her trusted companion, believed that there was a better interest in going to a more private place before explaining the reason for cooperating with Ark. Although she was not happy about Ark's presence because of the warning she had once given him, the three of them decided to eat at a local restaurant before starting serious talks. There, Aryan introduced her elven brother, Dankan Neil Maple, who was also on a mission to gather information about the elven slave trade. They started exchanging stories, but Danka eventually got bored and brought them back to the more pressing issues of whether Ark was ready to fight for the elves and whether he was capable of using teleportation magic. The skeleton knight confirmed that he was ready, but informed him that his teleportation ability was limited to places he had visited before. Danka may have been relieved, but the elven man then revealed the real reason they had gathered there that day. Now, the place where the enslaved elves were being held in the city. They were hidden by smugglers in a suspicious location within the red light district. Danka suggested that they wait until late at night before infiltrating there, though he warned that the building would be swarming with guards inside and out. This did not prevent Arian and Ark from successfully freeing the latter. The only problem was that he had gone to the local market and pawned all the items he had looted from the bandits and human traffickers he had recently exterminated. This was all just because he wouldn't take off his helmet and eat. Previously, Ark spent time in public to grab a snack, but he ended up being attacked by a large number of food vendors. They began to put all their dishes on the grill, and the gutless glutton was unable to resist this array of culinary delights. With relish, they finally decided to order one of the dishes before taking a seat at the back of the alley. Arian and Danka enjoyed their own meal at the restaurant, although he took a pause to point out the assertiveness of his fellow elves not to be dependent on others, especially humans. The swordmaster admitted that he didn't have many options in this situation, as his clumsiness ultimately put the elven children he was trying to save in danger if not for the presence of a boat. Had the children bonded by now? But most likely he would have joined them there. Arian began to punish herself for overestimating her own abilities, and Danka seemed to join in on this pity party by suggesting that her older brother, Evan, should be chained up. Apparently, she can handle things much more effectively than Ark and herself. He simply reprimanded her for underestimating herself and continued to assure the elven woman that she would be just as strong as her brother as long as she kept trying and determined her own path. The conversation quickly turned to Ark expressing relief that they were lucky enough to find someone who could perform teleportation. He wondered if the steel-clad knight was truly human underneath all that iron, but neither he nor Arian could tell. With Ark's insistence on keeping his helmet in place, the elven woman was convinced that her new friend was a suspicious character. Despite his attempts to prove that he meant them no harm, she decided to trust him despite his resistance. Danka proposed the idea that Ark might be a magical humanoid who had a peaceful relationship with the elves. However, the most important question was whether the armored knight really believed in him. When Arian steadfastly stated that Ark was as trustworthy as he said he was, Danka seemed to remember his words and accepted the skill skeleton as an ally, although he still felt wary about inviting intruders into their ranks. The sun soon took its leave. The sky envelops the entire environment in a shadow, indicating that it is time to begin Operation Elf Liberation. Ark joins his new elf friends outside the restaurant. They were preparing to infiltrate the seedy underbelly of the city and fulfill their promise to rescue the elves who had been cruelly captured by humans who only saw them as a source of profit. Unknown to these serious saviors of the elves, they are not alone in their mission. There would be another person who would also infiltrate the Red Fort secretly into the District of Light. That was a little boy with a fox-like nature, descending from the sky in a ninja costume, watching the surroundings while ready to make mysterious moves that no one knew about yet. No one knew exactly what was going on. This monumental night had been prepared for one of these 4 individuals, but there was little doubt that a desperate struggle was imminent. Ark, Arian, and Danka finally arrived at the location where the elves were being held. But before they entered, it occurred to Dana that perhaps their friends in armor would be better off losing all that steel if their plan was to be carried out stealthily. However, Ark had no intention of releasing himself from the shackles of his love, but he also didn't know what would happen, how to explain it without arousing suspicion. Fortunately, Arian intervened to ease Danka's worries by guaranteeing that they would not be discovered and had the intention to kill anyone who tried to stop them from being exposed. She was too obsessed with secrecy, But her biggest concern was whether Ark would be able to use his magic to fly them into a window on the top floor of the building, something only the skeleton knight was capable of, so they moved to the back. With impressive dimensional movements, the gang climbed to the window and impressed the elves. This made Arian feel the need to interrogate Ark and find out who he really was. Even so, the simple iron skin declared that he was just an ordinary old mercenary, although that statement was increasingly being questioned. Every time he said it, it didn't make sense. The elven woman then peered through the window excitedly and reported that there was no one inside, making it an ideal entry point, except that when Arian actually tried to climb inside, she ended up having a much more troublesome time. With her large chest and ass, she accidentally drew Ark and Danka's attention to her backside as she struggled through the window. Luckily, both men were polite enough to refrain. After seeing her riches during the embarrassing display, adding to her embarrassment was when she finally went through Ark only to drag herself and the elven man through the window without giving a frustrated warning. She complained that the skeleton could have given her a warning. Although she initially felt no need to show her little exhibition, she soon regretted it when Ark confidently assured her that he was looking away from her beautiful ass. Once he realized that he was stuck to move on from that unfortunate episode, the group headed downstairs to search. From the room where the elves were being held, they found the human smuggler's bedroom. However, when they found the smuggler, they were all asleep for good after being given a quick slash to the neck. Arian suspected that Danka might have done this himself before, but he assured them that she was not involved. He then warned his friends to stay alert, as the blood on the smugglers' bodies was fresh. A skilled killer in charge would most likely still continue the deed. Before long, the three of them decided to split up to cover more area in their search. With his dimensional movement, Ark quickly covered the entire area, while the elves chose to sneak in and out of the passageway silently, hoping to find their slaves. Ark, the skeleton knight, was the first to uncover something suspicious as he entered the locked room, requiring him to use dimensional movements to access it. He was greeted by even more dead smugglers, which left him puzzled about who might be able to defeat him. After the elves had struck, the answer to that question would arrive just seconds later when a Japanese kunai suddenly slid towards his shoulder, followed by a ninja boy who appeared in front of him and unleashed a swift attack that, although powerful, failed to penetrate him. The impressive Ark armor set realizes that he won't be able to send this armored man as easily as the smugglers he has already killed. The unnamed ninja asked Ark how exactly he managed to find his way inside the building, even though the skeletal knight was too preoccupied with it. For the first time, he met someone from the beast-eared race who would answer his questions. The ninja attacked an imposing figure, but at the sight of the adorable little Panta riding on Ark's shoulder, his expression turned softer than before. He stopped taking a battle stance and showed a much softer expression. After that, he did something that caught the skeleton knight off guard, even more so than his kunai attack a few seconds ago. He reached into his pocket to retrieve some small fruits before tossing them towards the loyal dog, who happily jumped into the air for a free meal. This deadly stranger kindly gave the food to the Panta, who then devoured the delicacy while showing his precious little face towards the ninja girl, who seemed to be completely disarmed by the fox squirrel's charms. The passage has no clue at all about what is going on now. Not only did Panta usually avoid strangers, but he also thought that his loyal dog might be worried about someone who had just tried to brutally kill. No matter what the problem was, when he met with Panta, she was sure that Ark was not only a smuggler she wanted to kill, but also not her enemy at all. She questioned him once again about what he was doing. Here, as the skeleton knight hesitated to give an answer, she had the nerve to guess correctly that he had come to free the elves. He also told her that they were being held in the basement of the building. More than that, she gave him a document containing information about the captives that would probably come in handy. He also promised that there were 6 more people hidden in the table in the room. Ark was astonished to receive this unsolicited help, and wondered if the unnamed ninja girl had come to rescue the elves as well. However, the girl firmly stated that this was not the case. She realized that the thing she was looking for was not here, so she decided to give all the information she had obtained about the elves before leaving the place. The Beast Girl directed him to the fact that the other two elves were being held in the castle controlled by the Lord of the Elves. After saying goodbye to Ark abruptly, she jumped out of a nearby window and disappeared into the night as quickly as lightning. Skullface regretted the fact that he didn't even have a chance to ask the girl's name before he left with a dodge. But those worries disappeared as he turned his attention to the documents given to him flash forward after Ark rejoined his fellow elves. We learn that each of the 7 pieces of parchment is actually a contract for the enslaved elves. Using these notes, they can track down the location of all those who have purchased the captive elves and freed them from slavery. A challenging yet necessary skill that was to come as there were still problems with the elves in the dungeons as well as those inside. Arian's inquiry in the Lord's castle focused on how he came across the relevant intel, and when Lee informed them about the mysterious beast ninja girl, he instead confessed that he obtained the information from the deceased smugglers before ending their lives. The fairy woman didn't question this account, but she had one request to make to her steely colleague. He and Danka would soon go to the Lord's castle to rescue the 2 elves being held there after they managed to free the ones in the dungeon. He wanted Ark's help in doing so, and Arian even offered an improvement in his payment arrangement. But he need not worry. His pretty little head, Ark, made him sure that he would be happy to fight by their side until this whole charade reached its proper conclusion. Just as Arian began to express his gratitude for the services that had continued to be rendered, they were suddenly ambushed by a group of smugglers who raised the alarm and were ready to attack them on the spot. Dana asked her fellow elves for their opinions on dealing with this situation. They decided that their best method was to break in using force. Wasting no time, she threw herself at the goon squad and launched a vicious sword attack that managed to cleave several of them. Without waiting, she immediately joined the Funns who had also begun fighting. Boldly and deftly, Ark penetrated and annihilated the foul group as if it was his job. He also joined the fray there, and cleared out most of the trash before they finally reached the dungeon where the young elven girls were held captive. The children were thrilled to see Arian coming to their rescue, though they were frightened when several large armor-wearing creeps ran up to them. A panicked elven woman reassured them that she was also one of the good guys, while grabbing the children with her equally large wingspan, before using her dimensional movement to exit the building. Together, Danka and Arian soon joined her, and eventually they all found themselves on the outskirts of the forest, with everyone present, responsible for the actions of an elven man who took the initiative to escort the children back to their respective villages. They left the task of storming the castle and freeing the 2 remaining captives, right on the shoulders of Ark and Arian. Excitedly, they ran towards the final destination of the night. They were both ready to head for the mayor's castle, if it was necessary to free all kinds of elves from cruel human slavery. As they got closer to the castle, we find ourselves in Lord Diento's room among the sacks of human trash, which is actually Triton, the Marquis himself. He was found naked, with an ominous appearance, while uttering fetishistic nonsense about his dissatisfaction with the beautiful bodies of bodacious elven women. The 2 captive long-eared women stare sadly and disgustedly at his plan to subjugate them. He mocked the stronger of the 2 as disgusting, while telling her to get her affairs in order. This did not amuse the cowardly dictator, and instead fueled his anger further before he proceeded to unleash his stones, one way or another. Attention was focused on his son, which was very sad. He managed to survive the rocket blast that hit his team some time ago, albeit with only a broken arm. Triton instructed his lost son to act as a witness as he strolled with these beautiful, long-eared women. But just as he began to feel uncomfortable and annoyed by the unwanted noise outside his room, which took him out of his comfort zone and led him to the door to ask them to close all the noise, saying the request was much easier than taking the action that was the source of all the noise. The commotion occurs when Ark and Arian wipe out every guard in the castle, as they attempt to rescue the 2 women who are imprisoned in the Triton's bedroom. Marquis is anticipated to be terrified by the brutal and bloody intrusion that makes him very happy. Although the pleasure was there, the fear pales in comparison to the uterus, which immediately recognized these warriors as the ones who thwarted its previous mission and sent it skyrocketing. Triton made a very wrong decision to confront them and demanded that they identify themselves only. Arian was quick to dismiss the foolish fat man with a stupid face with extreme prejudice, then went on to aid the elven women in protecting the last shreds of their purity, seized as an opportunity for her to save her own skin and quickly escape the castle. Perhaps Ark was lucky to see the fool just in time to stop him, despite accidentally punching a hole in the wall. As he approached the man who revealed a secret room on the other side, he called Arian to check everything, even though he was initially busy putting further smackdown on the pig who abused another woman elf very badly. The pig began to utter harsh words about how they would be paid for not respecting a nobleman like himself, which made Ark quite silent, so he stopped doing it. They considered ending the life of someone who was influential in the country's political structure in relation to Aran. However, her fate was the result of her own deeds and the lawlessness committed by her and others. From the beginning, the two races had made a peace treaty, so she confidently told Sina and the other elven women to finish the job and give her fair punishment for all she had done to them, as well as proposing that it was all the business of the long-eared woman. They easily accepted the offer when they brought the Tritons' worthless lives to the second wave. Castle knights appeared on the scene to try to defeat the threat of the elves and arc skeletons. However, something was kept secret from them earlier, and he asked Arian to hold them back while going to check things out. She used a fire spell to burn the attackers, giving Ark time to loot a secret room full of gold sacks. However, his elven companion joined him, and the skeleton explained that if they took too many funds from this room, the elven trade organization would not agree. It takes passion to pick yourself up and start over after a heartbreaking defeat. The right reason managed to fool Arian into believing they should take as much gold from the castle as possible. But in truth, Ark's insistence in this matter was only because he wanted to keep his enemies' spoils for himself after they robbed them of their cash. The Skullface weaved his gate spell one last time, freeing the two of them and the newly freed elven women. They managed to complete the elven liberation operation successfully after reaching a safe place from the enemy and were able to regroup. Aran told her armored companion that she didn't want to part ways with her and wanted to continue using her extraordinary skills in the upcoming battle against humans if possible. Ark noted to himself that he had the intention to redeem himself and return to his humble life after this mission. But his retirement from knighthood meant he couldn't force himself to refuse this beautiful woman's request for further assistance, because Arian believed it was time for her to introduce him to the elder of their village, who had to give approval for this smuggler to be acknowledged as a true ally. They sounded like harmless people, but would eventually make Ark take off his helmet and show his face. This was a very risky thing in his estimation. He didn't want Arian and the rest of her people to do it, would probably point their swords at him if they caught a glimpse of his appearance under all this iron. But when the woman firmly assured him that she would do no such thing, Ark finally relented. For the first time in the company of others, he slowly but surely removed himself from his helmet. Seeing his skinless skeletal face clearly brought Arian back, yet he refrained from voicing any disgust she might feel. Instead, she asked him why he looked like that, though it was a question that even Ark himself did not know the answer to. He explained that he had just woken up on a random day after taking this form, making sure not to shock her with the fact that he was actually from a completely different world. As promised, Arian assured him that the specifics behind his monstrous appearance meant nothing to him for having valiantly fought alongside her, and testified how far she was willing to go to serve her people. Now that she saw him, there was no difference from before, and she vowed to keep her skeleton a secret for as long as possible. He wanted it badly, especially if its skinless form was actually a curse. He believed his elders were capable of creating magic spells that could break the curse, returning him to flesh and bone. This made Ark very enthusiastic, with his awkward energy, as Arian reached out to him, giving a proper introduction and welcoming him into the big formal introduction. In was Arian Granis Maple, warrior of the strongest maple clan in the Canadian forest. Eagerly, Ark took her hand, accepted her gracious offer, and apologized for disturbing him for a while longer. This was the end of the first of many adventures these two partners were likely to have in the coming days. They suggested that they immediately meet up with Dana and the freed elves. They were about to embark on a long journey to elven territory. Ark felt provoked by the flash of renewed vigor because of what the future held. Although he lived in the shadow of society and prioritized a humble life that was only short-lived, he did not regret that fact. Rather, he was content to have a much more meaningful goal to strive for in his new life. And what's more, he had honorable friends with whom to tread this path forward, as they say at sunrise the next morning. Before dawn came, there was only moonlight and nothing to remember. But he had decided what he would do. We left Diento territory and traveled to one of its sister countries, the city of Olavu, in the country of Roden. News of the murder of Marquis Triton of Diento has reached this land, and the matter is urgent enough that King Callan of Roden has called for an emergency audience with his 3 children, namely, first Prince Secto Callan Rondal Callan Roden Olavu, second Prince Dakares Shishie Callan Roden Olavu, and second Princess Uriana Melon Marissa Roden Olavu. As their discussion progressed, Secto informed his family that the culprit behind the death of the Triton Marquis had not yet been caught. However, he got word that the dead bastard might bring his bad luck on himself. Unconfirmed news suggested that he had broken the peace treaty between humans and elves by kidnapping and selling them as slaves. Dakares quickly showed that no matter how embarrassing the rumor was, in the end it was just a rumor, and not something to be used to condemn someone. After the death, Secto questioned his younger brother why he was so eager to give permission to a nobleman to commit a despicable act. However, the Callan king quickly mediated the brewing argument by pointing out that although Secto had no business believing rumors so hastily, the situation was still dire enough that they needed to send an investigative unit to the Diento to get to the truth of the matter. The next day, he asked how Uriana felt about this situation, which smartly pointed out that if the rumors were true, then they would be involved as well. Not all types of elves liked the risks involved in the kingdom. She suggested that the main thing was to hold an audience with the elves so that they could quell any anger and unrest that might arise in their society. Considering the possibility of the elves' revenge for the Triton's actions against the Roden, it was imperative to avoid this. If that were to happen, their own kingdom would suffer from cutting off trade with Linbulto, and this would earn the Rodens the hatred of the elves and many of their own human subjects. Callan wholeheartedly agreed to every point made by Uriana and asked her to take charge in arranging a meeting with the elven officials as soon as possible. This caused their meeting to end quickly and abruptly, with the royal children leaving the hall immediately. While the king laments the difficult situation his beloved Roden is in, we cut to Ark, Arian, and Danka, who have just arrived at the elven village of Lalatoya, along with the girls that they rescued the night before. The parents of the kidnapped elven children responded with a warm welcome, wasting no time in hugging their children whom they feared were lost forever. Danka told Arian that she couldn't stay here because he had another mission prepared for him, so he handed over the resolution of this whole matter to her. She conveyed to Ark that it was now Ark's turn to contact the village elder and ordered that the village elder wait here until he had completed all his tasks, except taking care of the skeleton. Knight seemed too impressed to finally find the actual fantasy setting to cater to his desires. Arian took quite a while to return, so the sky started to darken a bit. However, when she finally came back, she asserted that everything was ready for him. When he met the village chief in person, he was taken to the village's great hall, where the very young-looking village chief and his also young-looking wife introduced themselves as Dylan Ta Lalatoya, a village chief, and his wife, whose name is Glennis Aluna Lalatoya. They greeted Ark while casually revealing that they were actually Arian's parents. This fact surprised Ark 6 times over from Sunday with pleasantries. The crux of the conversation began when Dylan told Ark that they had been informed about everything that had happened in the village in the past few days. Dylan also expressed his gratitude for the Skeleton Knight's help and the rescue of the enslaved elves. He expresses surprise that his own daughter would go so far as to cut down the king of the kingdom in what she considers good territory, including the way she burned down the Triton castle to do so. It was getting serious about excessive killing that would likely cause more problems in the long run than benefits. However, Ark alleviated the situation after explaining how bad things were for humans in more detail, and after Dylan assured them that his people would cooperate. Look to report the slave contract form that the Ninja Beast Girl handed over to the Skeleton Knight. Glennis also suggested that they dispense with all this work talk and instead enjoy a delicious meal together. In no time, he prepared one of his signature dishes, beef. Add some chili sauce to the vegetables and fresh homemade bread to add to the deliciousness of the meal, even though the food may look simple. Ark seemed hesitant to chow down because it would require him to show his skeleton face to his new acquaintances. Thankfully, they reassured him that it would happen. Arian had already hinted to them about his condition, so it was not a problem. They were fine with it all and very appreciative of the approval given. Happily, Ark removed his helmet before stuffing his skinless face with the food that was graciously served to them throughout the rest of the evening. The journey goes so smoothly as we finally see the exhausted knight, removing his entire armor for the first time as he finally gets a good night's sleep after a busy few days without rest. Finally, Ark and Panta got out of bed and left. When they arrived at the chief's kitchen, Arian and his father were nowhere to be seen, but they were greeted by Glennis. He instructed them to sit down and prepared breakfast in a short time as usual. While eating to fill their stomachs, suddenly the skull asked where Arian and Dylan had gone. Glennis explained that they had left the village this morning to attend a meeting of elders in the Maple Forest capital, after confirming that her friend had no other plans for the day. The beautiful elven woman invited Ark to accompany her for the day. Both Ark and Pona were unsure of her intentions, but they were immediately surprised because it turned out that the woman just wanted them to be sparring partners while she practiced her swordsmanship possessed by the Skeleton Knight. So Glennis's intentions were nothing indecent. It wasn't easy for Arian to fight this charming young woman with a sword, but she assured him that there was no need to worry. It was Glennis who had personally trained Arian in the art of swordplay, and due to their elven race had a natural affinity for Arian. In a physical fight, she is confident that she will not easily give up. Glennis admitted to being very curious to see just how large the knighted man traveling with her daughter really was, with an air of sufficient cleanliness between the two of them. After being allowed to start as soon as the fight began, the friendly expression and sweet smile of Glennis that had previously instantly appeared outside the window were replaced. Finally, she was allowed to start, but once the fight started, the friendly expression and sweet smile of Glennis that had previously instantly appeared outside the window were replaced. With a gaze full of hatred and thirst for blood, she almost instantly closed the considerable distance between the two of them. Ark didn't realize that he almost stumbled backwards in an attempt to avoid her attack. Although he made a dodging motion, it hardly helped him. However, she suddenly appeared right behind him, ironclad sparring partner, and hit him in the back with a force that sent him falling hard. In a quick and non-ceremonial defeat, Glennis praised Ark's sight power in battle perception. However, Ark felt that he was still a rookie if he could be easily defeated by such a surprise attack. They prepared for the second round, where Ark was asked to attack with everything he had. Although he was happy to, Ark realized that he still needed to learn a lot from training with someone who was a master of the sword. Although the next few hours of training only contained Ark being continually thrown at his ass by a Glennis who would not be outdone. She would not allow the much larger and seemingly stronger armored skeleton to land a single blow on her in what would prove to be their final fight. Skullface would come closer than ever to actually killing the elven woman by mimicking the exact same attacks as she did. In their first fight, he even showed enough intelligence to use his dimensional movement skills to suddenly teleport behind her, similar to how he appeared behind her. There was only one problem. And that was that even someone as skilled as Glennis would certainly not fall for someone who repeated her battle tactics back to her right, just as Ark was about to land the winning blow. Instead, he received a series of quick strikes that made him even more aware of the huge gap between them. As the skull of shame lay in an iron pile of regret and defeat, Glennis realized that night had fallen. She knew it was time to start cooking dinner before her husband and daughter returned. Gently, she asked Ark for help. Once able to rise, he quickly agreed to complete the cooking task. From this ill-fated debate, she learned that stat gains don't always mean anything. Ak squatting in the face of raw skill unfettered his story. Having high parameters would not make him strong. Lala Toya in the morning. This time, Arian and Dylan attended a gathering of elven elders called Glennis to Ark during breakfast. They arrived at the Maple City, the location of the ceremony and their birthplace. Arian and Dylan then rushed to the great hall where the other elven elders were waiting. Upon entering the brightly lit room, they were greeted by the leader of the entire elven race, and a man with an even more uninspiring name than Dylan, Brian Boyd Evangeline Maple. Dylan briefed his contemporaries on everything that had happened in Diento over the past few days with regards to kidnappings, enslavement, and murder. The death of the Triton Marquis gives us a hint of the great repercussions that may have resulted from the actions of humans 600 years ago in the country of Rodan. The act of attacking the elven race for no specific reason has led to a bloody conflict that lasted more than 2 centuries between the two peoples. Although the Tritons deserved their terrible fate, their death gives us an idea that their impact can still be felt today, perhaps causing regret for all involved. Finally, the Rodan realized their mistake and went to great lengths to atone for the errors of the elves that originated from them. A peace agreement between humans and the elves has emerged, prohibiting the capture of elves from any nation of mankind. The recent conflict in Diento Mark was the first such event in 400 years. This treaty has been massively ignored, and although it was committed by a Triton Marquis, a human who first attacked and killed a respected official, it is still considered a serious offense. This could trigger another outbreak of war if the people learned that the elves had killed him. In the meeting of the elders, the main focus was the extremely worrying situation. At the end of the meeting, Brian concluded that they needed to continue doing everything necessary to rescue the elves captured by the humans, while making sure to keep an eye on the Rodan so they could be prepared. After the official meeting was over, their old enemies decided to retaliate with force as the Lalatoya pair started walking home. Arian felt the need to apologize to her father for causing a major conflict, but Dylan was not interested in holding Arian back. His daughter was disgusted at taking the action she deemed necessary for the safety of her people, especially since the elders had given her permission to continue investigating the kidnapping, despite the repercussions of the Triton's death. Her only regret was that they could not see Evan during this trip. Evan was his eldest daughter and Arian's older sister. Although it was too late to look for her in the Maple, they decided to catch up with her. On another occasion, Dylan suddenly informed Arian that Evan was getting married next year, a shocking surprise for her sister, given that she had always regarded her older sister only as a rival. Seconds after the discussion, madness struck the maniac as she suddenly appeared in front of Evan. Lovingly, she knocked her little sister to the ground without too much force, with her head sandwiched between Arian's chest. Evan whined childishly about how her family had come so far without ever visiting her, despite her best efforts to sacrifice her mission that day just to see them. It's clear that she is not as upset as she says she is. Despite her frustrations, she still loves her long-lost sister. It was funny that her father did not get the same attention as Evan, who only noted his presence. With a glance, her father looked at Arian's face. When her sister referred back to the gossip that Evan was going to marry a man who was considered a fool, Arian looked disturbed. Although she did not admit to jealousy, she criticized her husband as being too serious, yet strangely did not discuss the identity of the suspected man. Instead, she focused more on their love life. Evan was more concerned about whether her baby sister had a new lover. Despite her life, She firmly pointed out that she would never let Arian marry someone who was unable to defeat him in a one-on-one fight, as you might expect. Arian quickly gets confused by the topic and swears that she has no romantic bone in her body. Actually, she was very annoyed by the embarrassing question. Finally, she ended their reunion early and told Evan that she had guests waiting for her in the village. She left her sister drunk and alone before leaving. The story continues as Arian and Dylan return to the Lalatoya house and find Ark and Glennis cooking dinner. They all sit at the dining table to eat together and talk about the elf kidnapping incident. Arian told their mother and guests that she had gotten permission to continue the investigation into the elven buyers they had found in the castle. However, she realized that the inhabitants lacked understanding of the human world and did not have the necessary numbers to send a team to the human civilization. Dylan pleaded with Ark to continue assisting his daughter in investigating this matter. He offered a large cash reward in exchange for this heinous operation, but Ark was already willing to help regardless of the payoff. He suspected that Ark might be more financially stable than they were. Dylan then introduced a more attractive payment method for his time information, which could make him release the curse that made him a skeleton. He tells the story of the Lord's Crown, a place where legend says there is a curse-healing spring. Although there is debate as to whether the place is real, those who believe the legend agree that it must pass through dangerous terrain to reach this fabled spring. This is the first time Ark has ever heard of the Crown of God, so Dylan needs a moment to explain that the world is home to a number of incredibly powerful dragons who are recognized as the lords of the land. In the domain of the dragon lords, there is a tree called the Crown of God. This tree is said to house many ancient spirits who are drawn to the incredible magical powers of these dragons. Accessing the Crown of God means risking angering the Dragon Lord, which means your life might be wasted. Humans are not allowed near this sacred area, but elves are held in many locations. He is highly respected by the Dragon Lords and can seek their favor to gain access to the Crown of God, as well as the bountiful benefits of his spirits. Ark began to regret the fact that he had allowed his skeletal form to change as he heard more and more about this legend. The cosmetics she chose became a big deal, when in fact it was just a cosmetic choice for her character, not the terrible curse that befell her. He decided to do all of this anyway, and believed that this information was a worthy reward for him for lending his sword to the elven race for the time being. Dylan was very grateful to the Skullface for choosing to stand with his people, but Glennis was more concerned that their new ally takes good care of her daughter in the world. When morning came, Ark would again set out with Arian to find the human who bought the elves in the current contract. Glennis asked for help to take her to a nearby hot spring so that she could rest and relax before starting a new mission. After making him an imposter during the debate match, that was all she could do for him after all the night skeletons were left behind. He was taken aback by how impressive the spring was when they came in such large numbers that unfortunately he didn't hear Glennis when she tried to remind him to lock the door behind him before he jumped in to soak in it would bite him in the skinny butt later. But for now, he and Panta enjoyed a nice quiet time as they let themselves unwind from the stress of the past few days, while Ark sat back and let his worries fade away in the bath. Hopefully, an elven swordswoman started walking towards the spring, hoping to replicate the same magic. Happily, she shed her clothes and opened the door to the bathroom without realizing that her roommate had beaten her to a pulp. Unfortunately, the two forgot to lock the door when entering the bathroom. This caused a completely naked Arian to walk in. On the same skull face, the former was preparing to take a shower, and the latter was busy doing just that. The elf woman was so shocked that she temporarily forgot that her friend Ark was a skeleton and began to scream at the top of her lungs because of an unknown ghost. Ark unexpectedly appeared in the bathroom, and she tried her best to remind herself that she was alone. However, his ominous face appearing in the hot water made it difficult for her to remain calm. She quickly locked the door to prevent the embarrassing episode from repeating itself in the future. As we found Ark staring at the ceiling of her room, she pondered whether her body shape was really a curse or just a cosmetic issue, as others said. While thinking about his avatar, He realizes that with his many high-level magical attributes, he has the power to remove many very complicated curses with just a flick of the wrist and casting a spell before he risks his life to go there. Some Dragon King Holy Springs thought that there was no harm in trying to remove these alleged curses themselves. They wanted to see if the curse really hit him. Just imagine how fascinated the skull-faced lord was when, after casting the anti-curse spell, she suddenly regained all the flesh that her skeletal members previously lacked. This realization was so shocking that she let out a scream that even made a yell. Eventually the puzzle was solved, but Ark realized that his hand would revert to a skeleton just seconds after he cast the anti-curse spell. Unfortunately, this meant there was no instant solution to the problem. However, at least it confirmed all other people's suspicions that he was indeed affected by the curse. This meant there was still hope that the Crown of Gods would be able to restore her to flesh if they could reach her one day. That afternoon, Ark and Arian departed from Lalatoya to begin the journey to the capital city of Olavu. They did so that they could track down the sordid excuse of humans buying the rest of the kidnapped elves. They found an outpost on their journey and stopped briefly to plan their next route. Rather than taking the standard route with Arian's carriage, they decided to take a shortcut to reach their destination. Ariane believed that it would be better for them to take a shortcut through the forest so that they could have a better time, but a kind woman working at the outpost warned them not to enter the area. The woods in this area claim that nearly a dozen people have been eaten by a monster. Over the past few days, there has been a creature in the woods known as a haunted wolf. It seems that this is not the kind of beast that should be taken lightly if you encounter it. Ark was grateful for the woman's helpful advice, while intent on living to see another sunrise. As it turned out, Arian was very familiar with haunted wolves, and she commented to herself that their tails could actually be a very useful item to have when they started eating sunrises. Arian asked Ark if she was okay if they went into the forest despite the warning. The good lady had just given them a reason to do so, and this time it had nothing to do with shortcuts, more about getting the story. She found a polite sap from a haunted wolf that she wanted to use to make a magnificent veil as a wedding gift for her beloved sister. Happily, Ark lends his sword to the sweet and charming cause, and they officially make plans to leave, find and kill the fabled wild animal. The next day, when they advanced to the next afternoon and arrived at the place where the haunted wolf was said to live, they had set up a small camp and waited for the beasts to appear, but they came quickly. They seemed to catch their own scent and emerged from the bushes behind them, their empty eyes filled with rage and their ferocious fangs ready to strike. They themselves had drifted into this unsuspecting prey naturally. Ark literally saw the fierce creature coming from a mile away and cut it straight to its wild face as soon as it was in range. The only problem was that the beast ultimately turned out to be nothing more than a magical illusion that dissipated as soon as his sword touched it. Unfortunately, the next haunted wolf that tried to attack him turned out to be very real, so he ended up being the one actually sinking his teeth into the boat's arm with the intention of tearing the thing apart if possible. It was the perfect time for the Skullface to be suddenly reminded that haunted wolves not only used to hunt in packs, but were also very adept at creating optical illusions to confuse anyone foolish enough to venture into their territory. Without waiting long, she was soon attacked by a continuous cavalcade of evil dogs. Arian didn't look any better as they also began to surround her, looking for the right time to attack. One of the wolves hiding in the treetops seemed to find the ideal opening and lunged towards the elven woman, but while Ark was instantly frightened, for his safety, he soon realized that the one who needed help was not the elven swordsman, but the haunted wolf. He chanted the earth element mantra, causing the ground to rise, and Pierce will begin to spread 3 illusions and kill one of them earlier. Actually, the wolf's impressive performance provided perspective on how important it was for Ark to learn from his highly skilled counterpart. It also confirmed that he could not rely solely on brute strength to get through this situation, even though he was uncomfortable with blasting certain areas. In order to avoid spell effects that could worsen the situation, he decided to use dimensional movement to attack the leader of the group directly. As he approached the cowardly creature, he cast a fire spell that hit a single target with such impressive force that the object seemed to explode violently as the dust cleared. Although the haunted wolf was damaged, he was still very much ready to continue the fight to the death with the armor-clad foe, which had killed most of the rest of the pack. Even so, Ark was not so eager to completely annihilate this opponent. The dangerous dogs tried to plead with the leader to calm their anger and leave the area immediately. Much to his surprise, the chief wolf finally agreed to negotiate peace and let out a noble howl to signal to the remaining pack members to retreat and leave the area. Ark requested, despite not paying, with a strange but clear skull-faced look that seemed to acknowledge the short-lived kinship they found with each other. After the dogs left the stage, Arian hurried to the side of the boat to tell him that she managed to bring down 3 of them, meaning she would have more than enough of their tails to make a beautiful wedding veil for her sister, the silver layer, which is precious.